Hello and welcome to the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians, the little show that could, in what started as a 6-episode experiment back in 2016. And after blogging every week for about 5 years prior to that, we pivoted to podcasting. I used to ask guests if they prefer tea or coffee and what they had for breakfast. I was picking at their morning routine, along with another 80 or so prepared questions, to now only have a handful of pre-prepared questions. Actually, there's only really one question that's pre-prepared. My favorite ice-breaking question. Now, this ice-breaking question is wonderful for almost any sort of networking event. Wonderful for anyone you're meeting for the first time. What's keeping you busy these days? The point of the question is for the person you're asking is to choose whatever they want to share with you that's going on in their lives. Same with my guests. I let my guests choose which way they want the direction of the conversation to go. So what's keeping me busy these days is all the strategy calls I've been doing with attendees of the Wealth Hacker Conference who purchased the half-an-hour call. Yes, a lot of those calls went well over 30 minutes. Anyways. Next, I'll be offering those same strategy calls to all my past clients. Yes, past clients, you got an email from me on Tuesday, 24th. That is just for clients only. I'll be doing the same strategy calls for them that I've been doing for folks who paid me good money for at the Wealth Hacker Conference. Anyways, in general, I find a lot of investors are just stuck and they're not sure what to do next. They're quite unsure of their next decisions, whether it is to sell an existing property or whether it's time to buy and get into the market for their next investment property, or some of those their first investment property. Anyways, in general, I'm finding a lack of confidence, which is fine. There's a lot of cons out there, and often they're by overly confident shysters who lack experience and know-how. What's worse is some of them are coaching. Some of those coaches are setting up their clients for failure. And honestly, it's even worse that they're charging like $10,000, $30,000 to do so. That would be called a negative return on investment. To avoid failure, we've always taught our clients to reduce their risks by investing in one property at a time. We guide them through the cash flow analysis, the execution of acquiring, renovating, renting, and sometimes refinancing. 99% of our clients, maybe 98% of our clients, complete one property at a time to ensure a winning portfolio of investment properties. I would call that boring, systematic, proven, predictable, low risk, and profitable, just the way I like it. We have a significant amount of data backing up our investment strategy. Again, we've been working with clients since 2010. I've been an investor myself since 2005. It's anyone who's been investing for that long, you generally have done quite well as long as you do things smart. We have over 45 self-made real estate investor millionaires among our clients that we help them acquire a property for. And our goal is to get that number up to 200 in the next few years. Enough about investing. All this talk about investing makes Erwin a dull boy. This past Saturday, I attended a long overdue. Actually, I helped organize a long overdue guys' night out, but not with just any guys. These are my real estate. It was a real estate mastermind of sorts. As we had, for example, we had Charles Waugh with us. He is an award-winning land developer. He's on the board actually of the West End Builders Association. He's a builder and developer. He's quite successful in real estate. He's made a lot of money. Andy Tran, the leading authority in renovating additions, and he's been the consultant on my basement apartments, all of my basement apartments, and the vast majority of our clients' basement apartments, and now going forward, garden suites. Roger, who I think owns at least 17 properties at this time. It's hard to keep track because he flips some, he holds some, so it's hard to nail down what his exact number of current holdings is. But he's transacted on quite a few properties, but with his own name on stuff. So active investor. Anyways, there was a ton of real estate knowledge out and about downtown Toronto on Saturday night, enjoying dinner. Actually, 2 dinners. We ate once at 5 and again at midnight. Which is technically breakfast? Anyways, whatever. 2 meals were had within 7 hours. A couple beverages. Roger even received an offer on one of his properties while we were eating our first dinner. He had to deal with it later on in the evening while we were having drinks at another bar. Anyways, hopefully you also out there have a great group of real estate friends. If you don't, I cannot impress upon you enough that you need to have your friends in real estate. It's great to be able to share and chat about war stories. I advised one of my clients recently, who's newer in real estate, to always be looking to expand your circle of real estate friends, to include those with more skills and experience than yourself, and more than those that you spend the 5 people that you spend the most time with. You should always be trying to grow, improve your network. For example, this one client, she's telling me that her coach, not me, but someone else, had 5 years experience, and she thought that was a lot. And I said, a lot of my friends have more than 10 years experience. So I said, you can very easily find some friends, make some friends that have more than 10 years experience. Anyways, speaking of investors with knowledge and experience, this week we have Mackenzie Wilson of SingleKey. If you haven't heard of SingleKey, they are the tenant credit and background check reporting service that recently acquired Naborly. I think when Naborly, just a few years ago, Naborly was dominant. But now SingleKey's now consumed them. Actually, SingleKey's actually made a lot of headway in the last little while. They're actually extremely popular in my circles. A lot of people are already using them. And also, quick side note, you're so lucky you don't have to run credit checks the way I used to, having to do one on paper, having to try to read these. I think there were Equifax reports at the time, and all these codes. Anyways, Mackenzie is a very diligent investor from Calgary, Alberta. He shares how he went from oil rigs and a very nice IT job at Telus, but they came with a pension, and he left it all behind to start an online business in real estate that didn't go so well. But he survived. He still owns his 3 duplexes in Calgary that cash flow, and he now works at SingleKey as a director. As you'll soon tell, Mackenzie is a diligent landlord, likely one of the most diligent I've ever met. He loves to help other landlords in Alberta, as he's always sharing and educating his peer group of 4,200 Alberta landlords. On today's show, we talk about the difference between a bit of an update on commercial real estate in Calgary, and how residential is doing. They're actually performing quite differently. The difference between investing in Calgary versus Edmonton. Talk about the rental market in Edmonton. Of course, we talk about tenant screening, of course, as it used to be a great fear of Mackenzie's. I guess it was more like an unknown for Mackenzie when he first wanted to become a landlord. But he's kind of mastered that subject now, and how appropriate that it is that he now has his day job at SingleKey. One huge nugget in the show is I actually asked Mackenzie, if I was a beginner investor, what should I buy in Calgary? And his pro tip is a really good one. So please enjoy the show. Hi, Mackenzie. What's keeping you busy these days?
Hey, Aaron, man. Thank you for having me on your podcast. This is an honor, and what's keeping me busy these days? Continual self-improvement, being able to take the day job from where I've been telecom in the past and oil and gas into directly relates to real estate now, becoming a director of content and community building at SingleKey. The title constantly changes, by the way, so it'll probably be different tomorrow. But having this focused in ways, and I'm not gonna lie, someone told me how hard parenting was, and I really knew what the challenge was raising a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old I'm currently at. I don't know if I would have done it, but man, is it ever rewarding, and I wouldn't change anything. But life in the fast lane of what we do these days. So,
Mackenzie, can I ask how old you are? I usually don't ask my guests that.
No, I'll call for it, man. I'm 38.
Oh, you're still young. Okay.
Oh, perfect. I appreciate that. Just the lack of hair and the gray in the beard. I always have the 10-year advantage on the look. Mm-hmm. I was good in high school, not good anymore.
So again, Mackenzie, you're coming from telecom. You're coming from. Are we not allowed to name your employer?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Telus. I mean, so born and raised. I'm from Calgary. Mm-hmm. I got 2 diplomas, both from state, so technical institute. One was a business administration major in management. Came back 2 years later in 2007, graduated in 2009 with information technology diploma, focusing in networking. So essentially, I had a job where I'd log into these devices, routers and switches that ran the internet, literally the backbone. Some of their size are the size of deep freezers, and a card in one of the machines be worth 50 to 100 grand, and the box be worth $500,000. And that was generally my job for 9 years, except I had a 3-year sabbatical where I moved into sales at Telus, got laid off, had an opportunity to come back on the operations side, took a package because it was the most money I've ever seen at that point in my life, bought a an RV or a travel trailer, which is one of my major passions is camping and all that. And just actually recently got a camper van. But left, worked in the oil patch. So basically I went from bashing keyboards and having IT fingers to slinging slips and drilling holes and roughnecking on rigs up in northern Alberta and BC. Did
Wait,
that
you
for,
went from white collar IT to
yeah,
as blue as you can get on the rig,
yeah.
working on the rig.
Yeah, so I tried it once when I was 18. I lasted like 3 months, and then I don't know if I started school or something. I don't remember why I left, to be honest with you. Didn't last long. And then in 27, I think it was 27, 28, I went back in the rigs for a winter, made a ton of money, was smart about it, kept it, and then I traveled with my now wife for almost 2 months. We did a Southeast Asia trip, and then I parlayed that into a 35-day, 8,000 kilometer truck and trailer trip, starting in Quincy, Washington, going down the West Coast and the 101 into California, San Francisco. I had a buddy who just quit Telus and got an engineering job at Facebook, toured the Facebook campus, and I was like, oh my God, this is completely
Like
different
Disney,
from what I'm
isn't it?
working in. Eye-opening.
It's like basically going from Disney, from an oil patch to Disney.
Yeah. So yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Mackenzie. For an ignorant Ontarian like myself, can you explain what like your typical day was working on the oil patch?
All right. You have, depends on the rotations. Mine was 14 days on, 7 days off. But on your days off, you had to get yourself back to start your 14-day rotation. So I would drive from Calgary up to between Dawson Creek and Fort St. John, BC, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is about a 16 or 14-hour drive. In the winter, though, it could easily go up to 18 or longer if the roads are really bad. I usually sleep halfway, so I basically had to have like 3 to 4 days off because you have to think that the travel days on both sides. And then did that for winter, and so a typical day would be you start on nights for the first 7 days from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then depending, you'd be rigging up, or I mean, I was on the double, so we typically drill a hole from getting on site to completion, leaving to the next site would typically be around 14 to 21 days to drill a hole from start to finish before they could put a service rig on and actually have it produce whatever the product was. Um,
Can I ask what someone makes doing this?
yeah, so I think, I mean, the rate it's actually posted on the Canadian Drillers Association, or I forget the exact acronym, but I think at that time I was 23 or 24 bucks an hour. But you have to remember the last 4 hours of every shift is a time and a half. And then when you hit to a certain number of hours a week, anything after that's overtime. And that's where you really make your money. And so you can make a lot of money quite quickly. It's not easy work by any means, but if you're willing to go hard and do it. So I mean, it was good for work ethic. But I also know that, and it's well said, you typically, you are of your 5 or 7 closest peers, who you hang around with.
Mhm.
And I certainly believe that to be true. And so it wasn't a forever gig.
Oh, like that, eh?
Yeah. There's really good people that for sure, but then you could also get people that are just completely driven by money and perhaps don't have the best values in life. And you get a few of them, and you're working in remote locations. They don't really see anyone else. And yeah, it can be certainly challenging. I mean, if you keep your wits and you work hard. I mean, and to give this context, I bounced around between a half dozen crews before I finally landed one that I had the ability to work the rest of the winter with. And yeah, it could be quite a little tight knit culture if you don't fit in.
Right. And these jobs are still available today?
Yeah, they're still doing. Actually, since COVID, and then with the whole demand dropping, the oil patch is very volatile. People will come to Alberta, they love it, they get good high paying jobs, and then they experience a recession or a decline or a drop in the demand, and a lot of people don't like it and they leave, and we have these cycle of people coming and going. But no, sorry, what was the original question? I forgot where we're going.
I asked if there's still jobs in this field, because
Oh
what I'm
yeah,
trying to get there is all this talk about recession and whatnot. It's always it's in the headlines every day. For example, Microsoft just announced they're laying off I
yeah,
don't know how many people,
10,000.
but I think that's like 6% of their staff.
It's nuts, eh? Yeah, 10,000 roles. But yeah, so there are positions.
Oh, sorry. Let
Um,
me just finish that thought. My point was that headlines, they love using gross numbers rather than percentages, because 6% of Microsoft is not that huge of a cut in the middle of the
oh,
first,
totally. Absolute over
right?
relative all day long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Amazon's cutting another 18,000. Again, it's concerning. They've like, I don't know, they've grown so much the last 3 years. These are very small numbers. I know it's unfortunate for anyone to lose their job. What I'm trying to
Mhm.
get to is though is that I'm consistently hearing from all my friends in more blue collar areas or they're executives of companies uh, who have blue collar staff, and what I'm hearing consistently is they still can't find enough people to fill those jobs.
Well, and to add on to that, so on the radio today, I typically try to catch the news when I drop off my kids at school, and I do the morning drop off for school and daycare. And the president of the Residential Construction Association for Alberta, or might have been for Calgary, don't quote me on that, said they're short 5,000 full time. What do you call it? Not red tape.
Red
Uh,
Seal,
red seal
carpet,
trades.
Red
Yeah,
Seal cart. Okay.
carpenters, plumbers, electricians, all that kind of stuff to build homes. Alberta needs 5,000 full-time positions right now. Trying to keep up with the demand to build housing. Our supply is lacking our demand right now, and we're
Mhm.
finally growing something that you guys have been generally called the normal growth in Ontario for I don't know how many years now. It's always been a different picture, but yes.
Since like 1990, I don't know how long.
And the macroeconomics aren't changing, right? It's not going away. It's
Yeah,
yeah, still a thing.
yeah. Oh, there's so many years ago. My point is that all this recession talk,
Mhm.
it still sounds at the end of the day, anyone who wants a job can have a job within a
Oh,
week or two.
and if you are really like, there's that saying, "Work harder, not smarter." But I say a fine line of having good work ethic and having some ability or talent to go with that. If you've got that, even if you got one of those two strongly, but if you have a good mix of those, you should have no problem finding employment.
Hmm, hmm.
Mhm.
And also, is it good or bad thing? I have friends who hire out of India, right? And my understanding is that their wage growth is skyrocketing,
I can
because
totally see
already
that.
many companies have been outsourcing to India. They're looking to outsource even more.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
Telus had huge initiatives around that since 2009, and we're in the Philippines as well. And yeah, I could totally see that.
so
Um,
so all those wages are going up. Um, so it seems to be a mixed bag, because again, I hear people are having challenges here hiring people, and then we're in this mix right now, but with hybrid at home work for it
mhm.
not. For example, Disney announced they want their staff back 4 days a week. My cousin in the federal government in Ottawa, they're mandating 2-3 days back in the office a week, right? So we'll
Yeah,
see. We'll see. Yeah, it's interesting times.
very much. And you think about that play on commercial real estate. We've had with our oil and gas recession going through the mid 2015s to right into we got the bottom of our trough where it finally leveled out and stabilized, and then we hit COVID. And so I don't know currently where the numbers at, but over the preceding years, we've been in around 25 to 33%. We've basically been at a third. So one out of three major towers downtown Calgary were completely vacant for office. So there's been initiatives to convert them into residential.
Hmm.
Um, some not-for-profits for shelters, and I think the things around there, and then we're trying to also always diversify out here in Alberta, which is good, but at the same time too, I think the advertised timelines to phase out fossil fuels are so far unrealistic, it's not even funny. So and we could go into that too, and we can talk about
It'll be a very angry conversation.
real estate and career journey. So
yeah. I do want to ask actually about the commercial vacancy. Are any investors getting into it, buying vacant commercial and converting to residential for profit?
I don't know,
because I think it's a wider discussion that's going to have to happen. Like, for example, here locally, the have you heard of Cogeco? They're like Rogers. They're like
oh, okay, Cogeco. Yeah.
So their head office is completely vacant. It's actually available for rent or buy, I believe. Right? That's absolutely insane. It's a huge piece of like probably class A commercial.
Telco, as slow as telco is in some areas, we're probably pretty advanced on that. I've always had a work from home hybrid model from 2009, from when I came out of state and started there as a contractor to now working there full time, and it became permanent over COVID, which unfortunately I didn't like, because I did appreciate the ability to get into the office. I was more productive since having kids. I found being in the office was actually better for me, but yeah, that's anyways, that's something that's always been there. So a lot of our office space is super vacant. They got rid of their corporate tower in Calgary, and it's all, I don't know who rents it now, all oil and gas. But where I worked in was core infrastructure, so we could never get rid of the building, but we had empty floors upon empty floors, and some had been renovated since like the 90s. It was a little bit of nostalgia walking into some of these floors. And you're like, cool.
Isn't that creepy? Is it all that?
Yeah, it's a little bit
so
weird.
empty.
I mean, man, like
like The Shining,
it is different. It's different, but you know what? I worked with really, really good people, and that's why I stayed as long as I did at Telus, because I had amazing teams. There's about half dozen of us that supported all facets of the backbone, pairing with other telco providers, and like incredibly smart folks. And I always knew when I got in the industry that it was never a forever thing, because I couldn't excel to be at the level they operated at from a technical perspective. So I always knew I had to switch. And funny you mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad. You took the training. It was one of my two catalysts that got me into real estate was reading the book. Yeah, which I imagine probably is for most people of my age group.
I think for about 8 out of 10 people I know who are real estate investors but read the book. I think somewhere around there. Yeah. I wonder what happened to all the other people that read it. It's just so logical. The takeaways.
Yeah, it's just
the action items.
A stable asset over time that you directly own, and if it burns down, still has value that increases and appreciates. I think it's phenomenal. Obviously, that's why we're talking. But and then
let's bring you to the beginning then. So, because it sounds like you were quite successful in your career.
And not bad. I was always stable and I had job security, which I've always been very appreciative of. Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you were union and pensioned as well while you were at Telus?
No, most of the time I was managed professional, meaning that I was non-union. I had a brief union role when I came back to Telus after I worked in the oil patch, just to get me back in the house. But then I went back to managed professional. So. And
those anyone get pension in those?
Oh yeah. You definitely there's they still have a pension, which obviously is not as common these days, if they even exist. So yes. Yeah, no, great job security. And now that I've left Telus, being there so long, and I'm seeing when I try to buy my own benefits and go to Blue Cross this past year in 2022, and I was like, whoa, wow, man, was I ever lucky and spoiled that I did not realize the quality of what we had. And yes.
Yeah, the grass is not always green on the other side.
No.
All the nice, now you have kids too. You have dental and eye plans.
I had a dentist appointment this morning from my oldest, and he's had 2 teeth pulled. I feel for the guy, but yeah, wow. It's not cheap. Let me tell you that.
How much was it?
So I'm paying out of pocket, where before house would cover everything, and I may have a small little bill at the end, and now it's I hope like this covers the 80% or whatever it might be. So yeah. Yeah. So start from the beginning. So
Yeah. So at what point did you get into real estate investing?
yeah. I had intentionally and non-intentionally. So I actually rented out the second time I went back to school. My parents moved and I stayed in the house and I rented out room by room while I was at SAIT.
Okay.
And I didn't like it. I wanted nothing to do with it other than I wanted to stay in the house because I had really good access to transit to get to SAIT.
All right. So sorry,
Um,
you stayed in your parents' home?
Stayed in my
And
parents' home.
got
They
it.
bought an acreage outside the city. I rented it out. My dad wanted to keep it and rent it. My mom's like, nah, I want nothing to do with this. Wasn't comfortable with it.
Hmm.
So once I was done using it for schooling, they sold it. And that would have been in 20 um mid to late 2000s. And then I intentionally got into real estate. Well, you know what? The catalyst was becoming a parent. My wife and I were pregnant. We had just got married, and I realized I had to not live 6 months in advance of my and plan only 6 months in the future. I was like, holy cow, or use more provocative words, I have another life that depends on me. And it was a complete paradigm and mind shift. And so I needed to start figuring out this nest egg and wanting to have a, a stable and secure future for my kids. So I had two catalysts. Well, I guess kind of three. Rich Dad Poor Dad, read that book. At that same time, my mom had just joined Keyspire and took me to a buyer's event in Toronto. I had no idea what was going on. It seemed super cool. In hindsight, 2020, looking back, it was very salesy, not a lot of value, but it was the exposure to this community of people trying to better themselves and the like-minded individuals that I really fed off of. And then the third thing was I discovered this podcast called Tales from the Trenches by a gentleman named Barry McGuire, who's a very
Mm.
well-known real estate lawyer up in Edmonton. In fact, just to give this guy credibility, he's been a acting or full-time lawyer in real estate longer than I've been alive. I think he's at, if I do the math now, he's got to be in his mid 45 years of full-time
Hmm.
real estate, not
Hmm.
including the education and everything else to get there.
Hmm.
So, and he really loves teaching and he's very good at the creative side of the business, which is learned a lot just listening to his podcast. So then, so we bought our primary house, which is where I'm still currently today. And we talked off the air talking about how there's this expectation and training that people can buy. They say, hey, you can buy this. We'll train you how to invest in real estate. You can quit your day job tomorrow and just go full time. And so I bought this house thinking it'd be a stepping stone. I'd be out in 2 to 3 years. And I renewed my 5 year, as my first 5 year renewal on the mortgage. That would have been in 2021. And we're still here right now. And, it's just food for thought on that mark. But I bought this house in 2016. We legalized the basement suite, had it as a mortgage helper for the first 3 to 4 years. And then we took it over because we needed more space with our second kid. And we had gotten to a little bit stronger position. And then my wife also realized she likes to work as well. We're both like that. We both tried doing the stay-at-home parenting, which was very challenging. And we found it's okay to be happy with both us working. But anyways, I'm rambling. I'm going to wrap this up on my thought here. And then at 2017 is when I joined Rain, and I had found a couple of buddies. We started a monthly meetup too because I wanted more of what Rain was offering with those monthly member meetup meetings, and they had the presentations. And I knew when I got into this business, I knew nothing. And I wanted to be around people and rub shoulders and learn from the more experienced individuals that had the scars and the lessons learned, that had made the mistakes, and I wanted to absorb that.
Hmm.
And I did a bunch of online training how to screen tenants because I knew right away if I can figure out how to screen tenants, the rest of the business can be easy and I can learn that on my own. But I was super nervous about that part because it scared me so much to have a tenant destroy a house or go into default with two mortgages and be financially ruined. Like that was my
Hmm.
my biggest fear, and it still is something to even to this today, where we're definitely more well off financially. I I need not to worry as much, and it's something I'm trying to work on. And
Hmm.
and finances has always been a big sticking point for me that I try not to focus on, negatively speaking,
A
negatively.
quick comment on the worry part. I find in my experience, the worry investors are like stable investors. They don't go big. They don't get big like some of the ambitious folks. Like people know my guests, my listeners know like who I'm talking about on my shows. Some of them, like they're big thinkers, especially highly confident people. But then some of
And they
these
grow up too
confident people,
fast, too big, too
yeah,
fast.
some of these
Like,
confident people grow too fast and they go crash and burn and declare bankruptcy and they're living in their parents' basement.
I've been around
And they
long
were
enough. I've
not
seen
worried
those stories.
investors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They were not worried investors. So it's not the worst thing to be a worried investor.
Yeah, but you don't want to control you a bit. I mean, so I've gotten a lot better. And a big thing, so then a big thing too, in like 2016, once I had my kids, I realized I wanted to just generally be better, be more productive. So I started a big, and I'm still on it right now. I'm very big on self-improvement, self-development, whatever you want to call it. Reading books, Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. We're talking off air, one of my favorite books. Um, and doing masterminds now. I attend one and I run one. Um, and then so so a weird journey. I always thought I was going to own a bunch of doors, 10 or 20 single family detached homes, fully paid off. I thought that was kind of like my end goal. Well, it was my end goal when I got into real estate.
Sorry, Mackenzie, just pause you there. When you said you mentioned 2017 as a key year, how many properties around that time did you have?
So if we measure them by door, I had my primary one, and then I picked up my second and third properties that are all now legally suited. So I got up
Okay,
to 6 doors.
right, six door. So three properties, all duplexes, for 6 doors.
Yeah, or bungalows with a legal basement suite or two of them.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Uh, and didn't Calgary offer some subsidy around basement apartments?
So folks out east listening to this, there's still a golden opportunity. Mind you, supply is super low right now. And anything in the entry level segment, there's multi bids going on. But a golden opportunity is
Sorry,
uh,
Mackenzie. You're saying today there's still multiple offers?
yeah, we have that. So this is really weird. Like, so it's not really weird. It actually makes a lot of sense when we look at the macro numbers. But I was just talking to a couple of my realtor friends, and I always like to get what's going on. She's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
anything entry level now to get into the market with qualification and all that stuff is a $500,000 to $600,000 house here in Calgary. I'm sure there's could be some cheaper ones, but generally that's entry level now in Calgary. And she said everything's got multiple offers, but you go to like that second upgrade kind of mid tier house, not to the high end, and like just crickets, nothing going on. So like
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
700,000 price point. So yeah, it's just interesting to see on the market. So that's one of the reasons why I've always loved single families is because not only is single family, they're entry level products that I own. The exit strategy is really clean. Really, I should be able to sell this property and cash out within 30 days if it's priced appropriately. Should move, right? No problem. And the fact that I have a mortgage helper in the basement helps mean I have even a bigger selection of folks or customers that could qualify and buy my property. So
Right.
I like that, but
Right,
I
because
don't
the
have this.
bank will finance a higher amount because you have more income.
If
Whoever
the
owns the house, whoever's qualifying for the mortgage, automatically has more income from the rent.
Correct. Yeah, and
Mhm.
it obviously varies by institution on exactly what that number is, but you have a bit more.
I think pretty much all
And
of them. I haven't heard of a financial institution who won't count that rent.
but they might not give you 100% of it. Like, it depends, right? Like some say it has to be, they only count 80% because then they take the other 20% covers like taxes and utilities and insurance
Fair.
and stuff.
That's fair.
Yeah, but
There are
still,
expenses.
yeah. You typically don't get 100%, but you add, I mean, that's huge, right? For a lot of people. And so I like that. And that's always been my primary investment strategy. So I haven't gone into small multifamily or anything like that because the exit strategy is much more complex, a little bit
Yeah.
much longer,
Hmm.
you need an investor type buyer, which is just generally a smaller demographic,
Mackenzie,
especially
you're
compared
not
to the
going to be able to
mainstream.
sell a 60 course on this, the way you invest. We need to talk some big numbers, some 200 doors, Alberta. That's what, it's funny. That's what people are talking about in Ontario. Go to Alberta, buy 200 doors, one building.
Yeah, it's Yeah. I got
Oh,
in.
sorry, I just pause you for a moment. Like
Sure.
what you mentioned about the entry level being on fire, uh, and the tier above for housing being slower, and then it gets even slower the higher up you go, right? And we see the same thing here in Ontario, which is why I actually tell my clients, if you're looking to trade up, now's the time to do it,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Like sell your home, either rent it or sell your entry level home, and then trade up into something that you can probably get some value out of, right? You're gonna get some value when you buy now versus if you go try to buy when interest rates start getting cut, right?
Absolutely. And I'd say a contributor to that is these interest rates, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Cool.
and that includes condos here. Like here in Ontario, condos, not all of them are going up, but they haven't fallen nearly as much as like a $2 million detached home. Yeah, I think
Mm,
prices are really different here.
yeah. Yeah. That's super interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Yeah, prices are crazy. Like $1 million house in Calgary is probably over two here.
It's doesn't even compare. You guys are crazy.
I know we are crazy.
Yeah, especially now I've had some time to spend over in Ontario with being with SingleKey and
Yeah,
hearing
yeah.
come to your guys' conferences and hearing how you guys talk numbers like, ooh, it's different. I just
Isn't it?
yeah. Well,
Isn't it?
and then I mean, like, I know we've talked about this on a few times that we've met up talking about the macroeconomics at play,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Please.
I always attribute legislation that governs the RTA and Residential Tenancy Act across the different provinces
Yes.
is it's like it's either an accelerator or a restrictor, right? If it's not and legislation has to be really ideally it has to be well balanced that benefits both parties equally to want to participate in that transaction. And I'm
Mm-hmm,
talking homeowners renting to renters.
mm-hmm,
And if legislation favors one side over the other, less people participate in that transaction. Therefore, there's less supply available, and it actually
mm-hmm,
affects everyone overall negatively.
mm-hmm,
Negatively. So,
mm-hmm.
I look at Calgary or Alberta, and it's like trying. We're good. It's very well balanced. So I would attribute to being like having a really big straw and slurping on the Slurpee, and it's easy. You can just pull through it. It goes. Whereas your legislation is like taking a brown little coffee straw for mixing coffee and trying to drink a milkshake or a Slurpee or something, and you're not going to get like it's very restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
So then overall, you have this massively unbalanced market. Um, I would love to really do to commence or like commission an official proper survey that's statistically correct to actually get an accurate picture of how many people no longer participate over the last 15 years or however long you guys had the
Tons,
current. Yeah,
tons.
like I think it's so understated that there's a huge supply sitting on the line. So everyone's like, oh, we need to add more supply, I need to build more. And that's true. We definitely need more supply across a lot of the provinces, but it's not only building more, it's participation supply.
Yeah.
Supply willing to participate in the market that people have. And if they had better balanced legislation, more people would be in there. And generally, when we talk about small mom and pop landlords, the type of products we own are, single family basement suites, perhaps even renting out rooms, really fit the mode of affordable housing. That's the type of housing that actually has the lowest price point. And because I don't operate at scales of economy, I'm always very price sensitive and competitive compared to a boardwalk or whatever big multifamily company down out east you guys have. They sit on 100 vacant properties. They're going to demand an extra $200 to $300 a month because they can. They have the operating bandwidth to do that. I know if I take 1 or 2 months vacancy, I might as well have already dropped it $200 to $300 and had it rented from day one. So
Mm-hmm.
we're by the nature of how we operate, we have to be competitive. So the major supplier of affordable housing, and that definition is, I hate using that word because it means so many different things to so many different people. Um, Really we're the big mom and pop landlords are the biggest supplier of the closest thing to affordable housing. That's the better way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a CHMC
The
or
society seems to benefits most from mom and pop supplier of housing.
100%.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of studies from the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation. The one the one about the price difference between small and big landlords, they estimated, and I think this is actually a very conservative number. I've I'm confident it's higher than in reality. The estimate is like a 12% difference, and I'm sure it's like 15% or more, because I can just anecdotally speaking from my experience what I was charging for similar units and to what they are. So that's one thing. And oh man, I had another point here I want to go with. Oh, and then the market share. When we look at the actual supplies in of rental stock, what do you, and I know we talked about, so you're going to probably know this answer, but I'm going to ask you, it's your podcast. Erwin, what do you think when you look at all the available rental housing stock, the percentage of market share that small mom and pop owners have versus any large multifamily players?
I've seen this stat a couple times. It's actually a lot higher than I think most people think. At least it caught me off guard how big it was. I don't know, 60, 70%.
You're banging there. It varies by province, but that's like 65 to 70% is what I've seen. And there's not really an official study that captures it well, because when you look at the CHN's, the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation's numbers, they identify mom and pop owners as secondary supply. And because it's not easy to aggregate or survey or get a good feel on those numbers, they don't include it in their studies, which is like, hey, so if the entire market's 100%, and we can only really survey efficiently the multifamily players, we're going to call that the whole market.
Yeah, which is what they do. CMHC calls the property managers of the largest apartment buildings, not mom and pop. Right? Yeah, because it's easy. They're large. Totally. They're a large aggregator of data, not you and I.
No, exactly. So the average landlord, I'd say, across Canada, from what we've seen being at SingleKey, owns around 2.5 doors. The CMHC just came up with another article. No, Stat Canada just did a release to kind of trying to quantify this too. And they say most people only own 2 properties, the primary and one other property. So, and
sorry, Mackenzie. Sorry, can you say that again?
Sure. So
CMHC saying there's the average how many?
It was Stats Canada. They only looked at 3 provinces: Ontario, BC, and I think it was Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. And they said majority of people who own multiple properties, so multi-property owners, actually only own 2 properties. There's a primary residence plus either a recreational or 1 rental is typically what it was. So then we got these legislation plays and policy and public policy coming out saying, hey, for example, I was at an NDP town hall in Alberta as a virtual one over Zoom in October last year. Might have been September, in the fall. And they, I heard a lot of really challenging stories that people are going through. And I guess on a sidebar, I 100% believe that everyone should have a roof over their head. I believe that's right, that you have to have your basic needs need to be covered: food, water, air, shelter, 100%. But when people define affordable housing as perhaps, what does that really mean? And so does that mean it's a 2,500 square foot 2-story house with walk-in ensuite bathrooms, propane hookup on the deck with a hot water tub or hot tub? Does that mean it's only a 2-bedroom condo, or maybe it's a bachelor or a studio apartment where there's no bedroom, or is it a bed down at the local shelter with shared amenities? And we haven't even got into the plethora, the hundreds of thousands of needs in the healthcare side. And we're talking about society, which means everyone. And you just look at how many unique needs there are out there. It's the word affordable housing is unfortunately used a lot. And like I said before, it means different things to different people. And there's a bit of an expectation that affordable housing should probably be perhaps one of these more expensive types of housing, which I don't know, it doesn't quite work. But I mean, I'm a huge proponent and supporter of making sure everyone's got a place to sleep at night. Because if you get your basic needs covered, then you can really excel through, Maslow's pyramid of needs, where it's got physiological at the base layer, and then as you get up, you can do more, you can get more intellectual and contribute back to society. Everyone needs that basic layer covered, and I believe that's everyone's right to have that. The challenge is now, where do we draw the line? Can we draw the line? But I listened to a really interesting podcast. It's called The Future of. It's run by ATB Financial, which is the Crown Corporation in Alberta credit union. I don't know if it's still Crown. think stolen by the government. Anyways, Todd Hirsch is one of the he's their senior economist. Okay,
Yeah.
good. You know him. He's the host.
I was remember.
And he had an awesome guest on, and I'm forgetting. I think his first name was Richard. I can't remember his last name, but Richard ran this foundation to end homelessness, and he started Alberta, but now he's doing Canada wide. And they talked about this story where in Medicine Hat they had technically ended homelessness, and they define homelessness as less than 3 people living on the street for over a period of, I think it's like 2 weeks or a week. I don't quote me on their exact definition, but something like that. And what they did, they had treated homelessness like it was a natural disaster that they had a pop-up emergency kind of control center. And what they were doing was they were trying to get as close to real-time data points on every individual living on the street, their unique mental and healthcare, and if they had any unique needs, which unfortunately people that fall into that segment typically have, special or pre-existing health conditions and mental challenges that require additional care and support requirements. And so what they were doing is by aggregating in near real time many data points on individuals that were in homelessness, they were starting to be able to see trends that they could craft solutions to find ways to get these people off the street permanently. And they said, and this totally makes sense, and I 100% agree with this, someone that is living homelessness that bounces in and out of, with the police and with hospitals, costs the taxpayers more money and the resources they tie up than paying 30,000. Like it was in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. So, putting these people in the hospital bed and really expensive.
Yeah. So it's finding a permanent solution with government money for these high need individuals that have complex health and mental challenges, gave them a better quality of life, and actually end up costing the taxpayers a far lot less. But he said, Richard said that they, part of the strategy, you have to have data in near real time, and you need enough of it to paint a really good picture of this person's needs to architect that solution that they need, because there's just so many unique needs and housing needs that come accordingly with it. So, and I guess the one thing too I did take away, he's like, well, and the other thing too, it shouldn't be on the private individual to wear this burden. And I would 100% agree with that, because my sister's a nurse, and I see what she's taken to learn all that, and she's a general LPN, let alone an RN or someone that specializes in the tens of thousands of unique healthcare needs out there. You can't expect an individual to provide that kind of care in a private rental residence, but society is kind of pushing that way, and some of the public policy is more vote getting, unfortunately, than actually doing good in the end with what they're putting out there. Sorry, I got off my soapbox. You let me get on top of that one, and it's I get going and rant a bit.
Yeah, the story's new to me. I Googled it. I found it on CBC. I know some people hate the CBC, but at least they report, at least they report the news on this article. But yeah, I can't wait to dig into it.
Yeah, dig into it. And unfortunately, so that was in the summer last year that they solved it, and then I heard another article came out in the fall saying that
this is October dated. October 3rd,
they solved it. They now have a homeless problem again. But I mean, the fact that it's so minimal for a decent sized Canadian city, they're doing something right. So, it's super cool stuff.
Yeah, it looks like it got higher after. Anyway, I'll dig into it anyways. I'm fascinating subject. Okay, back to the subject of real estate investing. For the ignorant Ontarian, can you explain to me if I were to, ignorant Ontarian, we're friends, Mackenzie. I fly to Calgary. I say, hey, Mackenzie, I want to buy myself a property. What should I get into?
Well, it depends. Like, what's your needs? Like, what's your risk tolerance? What's your your duration of hold period? And
yeah, okay. Well, for me, I buy for 10 years.
Okay,
right.
Sure. Like, if
renovations do not scare me at all. I actually prefer to renovate.
Okay.
Right.
Well, right now in Calgary, speaking this time, so we're speaking early 2023 in January, to the end of this year, and I forget exactly when it is, the city of Calgary extended their a program to godfather or give you amnesty to get a legal suite built up to there's two standards. One's a lot less in terms of cost and really what you need. There's the building code and fire code. I always get them mixed up, but right now, instead of going to the more stringent standard, they will godfather you and allow you to qualify at the lower standard, which will save you a ton of money. So the big takeaways are if you don't have to put a secondary heat source in, which if you're drywall and running ductwork and put a second furnace in, that's already tens of thousands of dollars. That's
wait. Your standard code is secondary furnace. So if you're doing a full to code duplex, you have to have two furnaces.
Yep, separate heat sources for each rental, fully self-contained, interconnected smoke alarms, proper size egress windows for a firefighter to enter the property with a Scotty air pack on their back. There's a few other things too, and then parking requirements and so on and so forth. But
sorry,
right
what are
now,
your so okay, so for a permitted legal basement apartment suite, I need how much parking do I need?
In Calgary, typically I think it's I haven't looked at this in over 2 years, so I think it's two spots upstairs and then an additional spot downstairs.
Holy Hannah.
Yeah, 3, and it has to be on the lot itself. Now I think that's relaxed a bit because that's when I first started. Because now they added into the fold last year as well. So here's another diamond in the rough. Semi-detached dwellings can now get their suites legalized.
Nice. In Hamilton, they just did away with all parking. You
As
don't have to add any parking. Yeah.
Oh man, that's way better. Yeah.
I think we have one win.
Yeah, there you go. I think it's far less too, but yeah, that's kind of where it's at.
Two furnaces. Do you need two cooling sources?
Well, AC is optional, right? I mean, no, so you don't need two cooling, but it has to have proper ventilation. So if you do baseboard heats, then you need a was it HRV or air recovery ventilation unit or whatever it is that circulates the air.
Really?
Yeah. So if you're doing net new, this is what you have to include in your
That's a lot of money to put in.
Oh yeah,
an ARV.
That's why there's a great opportunity right now if you can buy the right property that has good bones. You know, if it's got the right size of windows, if you've got the power panel in the common area and the common access area instead of sitting in the bedroom in the basement suite.
Mm-hmm.
You can access the utility room without going in the basement suite. If you can find good layouts like that, man, and they have in the way they qualify, and I forget the exact cutoff date. I want to say it's like March 2017 or 2018, whatever the cutoff date. Again, you go to citycalgary.ca and find all the exact information.
Yes, folks, we are not fire inspectors nor building code inspectors for Calgary. Please go to Calgary.ca, you said, to find out the exact details.
Yeah. But we're trying to catch up to Edmonton. Edmonton's been ahead of us on the legal suite page or movement. They're a decade ahead of us. And in terms of their like bylaws, and they did blanketed secondary suites across the whole city, as long as you just met these minimum requirements, parking, heat sources, whatever, you can do it all, and it's awesome. So we're trying to get there too.
Sorry, Mackenzie, just to pause you there. I had a friend of mine who lives in Hamilton, invests in Edmonton. He actually mentioned to me it took him about 5 months to rent out his basement in Edmonton. So that's a massive win for. So actually, sorry to give context. I believe he rented for well under $1,000 for a brand new 2-bedroom basement apartment just outside the city of Edmonton. My point being is, well, you're saying like it's Edmonton's done a great job with their basement apartment bylaws and zoning and enforcement, and all sorts of things.
Yeah,
which is wonderful for the tenants. Not so great for us landlords.
so let me give you context on that. And I've talked about this, and this is going back to legislation and rent controls and all that stuff. So you go across Canada, it's by province, the legislation that governs our industry. In Alberta, we're the most balanced jurisdiction. We don't have any rent controls in the sense that you can't raise rent more than once every 365 days, but you can raise it to wherever you want. Now, I'll say that with a caveat. If you do a very predatory rent increase, and you go into the RTDRS, which is our lower form tribunal for mediation or you go to the courts, they'll throw that out. Like if you go call it $1,000, just arbitrarily speaking, and you double to 2,000 or 1,800, and you're well above market rates, they're gonna throw that out. But I mean, within reason, whatever current market rates are for your product,
throw it out as in they're gonna say you can't do that.
yes.
Okay.
So yes, on the legislation on paper, you can raise rent to technically anything you want. In reality, it's got to be within reason with what the current market rates are, which 99% of the people, that's fine. But I've seen cases I've read the results of hearings where they've thrown that kind of stuff out. So I mean, so where I wanted to paint this picture is you see rent controls in Ontario and BC where I'm sure you've had these conversations lots on how they actually artificially push rents up because and I think and part of the problem too with rent controls is also in both BC and in your guys' province in Ontario. When a tenant moves in, they don't have to move out until they want to move out. Where in Alberta, each party, if it's a fixed term, it is a fixed term, meaning that when that term is over, that lease is done, they have to move out. I think that's a huge kind of component to it. But let me get back to the story. So we got well-balanced legislation, and then I looked at the rents last year, and I saw this was super interesting. And this is my prediction or my read on what I'm seeing is rents went up across the country everywhere because of inflation, right? We're dealing with an inflationary period that we're in. All these rents went up. Between two major cities, of all the major cities in Canada, only one city was substantially lower than everybody else. Now, why would that be? And I'll give you one guess. It's in Alberta, and it's either Edmonton or Calgary. Which do you think had lower rents?
Edmonton. Actually, no.
Edmonton.
Calgary's had really low rents as well for a period of time. No.
Yeah, no. But so when our rents went up last year, and so did Edmonton, I'd say Edmonton basically stayed at the rate of inflation. That's what they increased by. We almost doubled them from where our average rates rent rates were, and the reason why is a restriction on supply. Edmonton has had they're a decade ahead. They had their blanketed wide legal secondary suiting. They had a more affordable housing. So really, the supply has always been very well balanced in that city, and it hasn't risen as sharply as it has here in Calgary, where we're having a challenge meeting supply needs. So what I wanted to highlight there, though, is because we had the best legislation in the country on a provincial standard that allows more people wanting to participate and participate in that transaction. We got more people coming in to supply the market as demand was going up to meet it, which is great. That's what you want to keep rents competitive. And then you've got the next restriction when you go down from the provincial level is access and zoning. Where can I build supply? How easy can I build supply? And hands down, Edmonton is well past Calgary for that with what they've done with their bylaws and zoning and secondary suites and all that. So they've had a huge amount of supply. They have not only that supply, a lot of that supply is very entry level, again, how we talked earlier about affordable housing, the basement suites, all those kind of things where they're just typically less desirable, that they command lower rents. And so, I mean, if all things being equal, Calgary and Edmonton should have had a very similar increase in their rents from an economical perspective. But because of those things we just talked about, they were able to meet their own demands, and their rent stayed a lot more stable and only increased to what inflation was going, what everyone's experiencing with interest rates, mortgages, increase in insurance, and so on, and other costs that drive rents.
That's good news for buyers and tenants. That's not what I want to hear as a investor owner, as an existing investor owner.
Yeah, it's still a good thing because you're
sorry, in terms of Edmonton, like from what you're telling me, I'd rather own. I'm an investor, right? As a business operator, my product I want to be in short supply. It's just like Apple, right? They're always sold out of stuff.
I'd rather just have stable, ongoing, slow growing rents. What Don Campbell's always preached. Yeah. I'd be okay in Edmonton because then your cost to get into products is also a lot cheaper. Whereas we have older bylaw and zoning and building code that you have to adhere to at a lot higher cost point to get in. So it depends. I mean, depends your buying power and what your numbers are and all that looks.
Right.
It's not
depends.
Bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Different price point, different budgets.
Yeah. And you know what? But you look at the growth, their appreciation is very similar to Calgary and really any of the major cities in Alberta. And I like the two major cities in the sense that we're more of a balanced market when you compare the roller coasters of a single industry, small city or town in Alberta. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about oil-driven Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, things like that. Like when they make money and things are booming, they spike. It's a roller coaster up. But man, just as fast as you go up, you'll come down. You tie into a major city like a Calgary and Edmonton, we've got
Mm-hmm.
post-secondary, we've got agriculture, in multiple industries driving the local needs of the housing stock. So if one industry takes a kick in and is going down, you might have a bit of an decrease in supply or rent, but you're not riding the roller coaster of a single driven industry town or city.
Yeah, Jared Hope is a past guest of the show. He shared that he'd never go outside Edmonton again. He would never, as in he wouldn't go to a small town, Alberta again, because I think a lot of people got whacked in like Fort McMurray, for example. So I want to continue with this Calgary grandfather suite example. And for the listeners' benefit, at least here in Ontario, there's so little you have to do if your unit's grandfathered. For example, my information is outdated. Please go to your fire department and ask them how the laws are enforced. But when I attended a presentation from the Hamilton fire inspector, he gave a presentation to realtors so we could understand fire code for legal non-conforming property. And at that time, it was very simple. We didn't have to change separation between units. We didn't have to do anything. Like that was grandfathered. What was like the requirements were so little. Actually, no, fire escapes that was required. But for duplexes, typically there's no fire escape. It's just egress. The big thing really was, and it was really simple, was an ESA, Electrical Safety Authority certificate on your house, right? So that was like the only not even difficult thing I needed to grant for fire code compliance for a legal non-conforming apartment. Typically,
would the fire department come by and inspect a property to give you this ESA?
No, it's electricians do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's, and again, that's this presentation I saw like 5 years ago. All my apartments have permits, so I don't do that. I don't go through that stuff anymore. But like for what you're saying is, to not have to put in an HVAC system or an ARV system.
Well, so to get grandfathered, it has to be pre-existing prior to March of, again, I check your numbers as well. I think it's 2017 or 2018. I can't remember. And so and to prove that, the way they're doing them. So here's some pro tips. You look at expired listings that mentioned mother-in-law suite or legal suite. You look at the products used in the basement suite when they're the manufacture dates on PVC piping, the back of drywall, to give you a rough idea of when that suite was built. And if you could find some documentation, that's how you could qualify for this grandfather program. And it's absolutely huge, because if you're trying to legalize the basement suite after the fact, that's pre-existing, you're probably just better off to buy an undeveloped basement suite where everything's undeveloped basement where everything's open, and start from scratch, because you're ripping out drywall, you're running ductwork, you're putting a second furnace in, you're separating it from the upstairs ductwork, doing your cold air returns. It's a ton of money. And
your architect fees, permits, vacancy during the construction period.
Yeah,
this is a great pro tip, Mackenzie.
100%. And I haven't done it in a while. So I mean that's the diamond in the rough right now in Calgary, is that if you can find some of these properties, and then they added in semi-detached only. Well, I shouldn't say only. It's during COVID or just before COVID. Man, time flies. But so I mean that's the other opportunity right now too. So there's a lot of properties to get in and do it right. So I mean the big takeaways that your properties have to have is proper size egress windows in every bedroom, interconnected smoke detectors. However, you can do they have to be hardwired for power. There's a set out there that wirelessly talk on their own proprietary wireless network that will interconnect between the upstairs and downstairs suite. You have to have a fire separation between floors. So that can either be done by drywall and proper mud and taping. I think it has to be 5/8 thick drywall. Again, check your local bylaws. Or you have to put a fire sprinkler into the basement in the utility room, where you can't really reasonably separate with drywall because of just the shapes of pipes and all that stuff. It's a very challenging space to drywall out.
Which is my favorite. It's much cheaper than having a drywall, and also you don't have
messy. It's one afternoon's visit for 3 to 4 hours. Like plug it in, and then you get your certificate.
Sorry, Mackenzie, just for the listeners' benefit, if you drywall, then that means anything behind the drywall you can no longer access as well. So if you need to do any sort of maintenance or repairs, that's all drywalled off. That's not good.
Which is like right up beside the ductwork on your furnace. Yeah, it's just not a very good solution. And then
it's more expensive than versus a sprinkler head.
100%. It's probably 3x more expensive. And the other takeaway in that is you need to have at least a 3/4 inch water feed off the main. Some homes in Calgary are only fed by a 1/2 inch, so like you're hooped.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, you can't build it. So you want to know. I mean, that's a big expensive catch-all is making sure that water line that you tied into is fed by 3/4 inch feed. Yeah.
Will previous owner affidavit work to prove the unit existed for grandfathering?
I wouldn't see why not. I haven't tried it personally. The ones I bought had expired listings going back to the early 2000s and 2010s.
Got it. Just in Ontario, our government usually wants a bit more. That was preferred over what was in the listing, or versus even what the property is taxed as.
yeah, and like
every jurisdiction is for the listeners' benefit. Every jurisdiction is different, so.
Municipal, we're talking the local level.
Yeah.
So like
because the local enforces, so they set the rules.
That's by law, right? So I mean, coming back to, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean,
man.
Yeah, I mean, and like just to kind of like, I want to wrap up this kind of like journey, because I think I've taken, as you said, every time you talk to an investor, they take something very, very unique. So I pivoted, and I haven't bought more properties. Because I did try to do the fundraising, the JV thing, and I found that was super challenging and awkward, kind of talking about the money. But I'm good at tech and kind of building process. So, I started a company with 2 other guys. We did meetups, local meetups monthly, and we're trying to build education and a bunch of other things. We realized quickly, all great individuals, we just had very different ways of executing the business plan, and we didn't agree, so we went our separate ways. So after that point, I started a YouTube channel, and I think even till today, I'm still the only one that had a YouTube channel called Find Great Tenants. It's the only YouTube channel dedicated to finding tenants, because I knew how important that was. And this is about the same time I had that conversation with that Rain Diamond award winner, and I found out that I was doing things differently. So one thing led to another. I built a bunch of videos on YouTube. It's now called Alberta Landlord Community, folks, if you want to look and find it on YouTube. And then I joined a Facebook group. I shared one of my tip videos, and I got kicked out within like 6 hours. Before I woke up, I was out of the group. And that's actually the group that I run now. So fortunate enough that the gentleman that was running at the time, Chris Noble, saw value when I posted. He went and messaged me, and we had a phone call. I got in a week later, and then 2 weeks later, I said, "Hey, Chris, let's have a talk show about landlording, because there's just so many nuances in the business." And later that year, this is 2020 in the summer, he gave me the group and gave me full control, and that was I was completely grateful for that. And then so I did that on the side, and I built a couple of courses and sold some here and there, just only on tenant screening, because that's what I knew very, very well, and some other kind of tech related daily operational stuff, and did okay on that. Then this summer, I tried launching a paid membership, and I crashed and burned. And I think I got tough skin, because people were very very willing to share their comments, generally good and bad. And sometimes,
so sorry, you tried to monetize that group? Is that
yeah, I wanted to provide more value. I wanted to, so here's what happened. I tried offering a paid membership, kind of like the Rain model, but more just landlording, because there's a ton of investing groups out there. I mean, you guys have got Wealth Hacker. You look at every major city or province, there's a dozen investing groups, because investing's cool, it's sexy. But when you talk landlording, we're like the ugly stepchild, the black sheep in the room, where no one wants to talk about landlording.
Let's talk about operations. That's someone else's job.
Yeah, exactly. Like
we're visionaries here.
Toilets and broken toilets and tenants complaining at 2 a.m. I want nothing of that. So I focused on that, and I was like, if I can figure out this and make this pain point easier for people, I'll have something figured out. And then so we got some sponsors that came into the Facebook group, and actually SingleKey was my first sponsor. I was a huge advocate of them. They give really good, comprehensive reports when picking the tenant. And I've always said tenant selection, most of your work is done up front, like 90% of it. If you find the right tenant, you do all your proper due diligence, check your checks and stuff, and they're a good fit, then the rest of that tenancy until they move out is generally really smooth sailing, other than just keeping maintenance and repairs up on the property. But man, if you pick that wrong person in, you could have that perfect property beside the GO train, downtown Toronto, whatever. If you and it could have everything you need and to really easily rent out. But if you put the tenant in that doesn't pay, you're still making $0 a month. You're losing money. You're going through stress, and you're probably not going to stick around this game because it's a very uncomfortable, stressful ride to fix those kind of problems. So it's absolutely critical to get the right tenant in the beginning. So
and then how did? Sorry, yeah. No. So then the follow-on question is, you're a big fan of SingleKey, and then how did you join SingleKey?
Yeah. So I've been trying to provide additional value with this Facebook
Actually,
group.
sorry, let me pause you there. We should probably explain what SingleKey does.
Good.
And that it might even help. You tell me again, the ignorant person from looking in.
Yeah.
So, for example, a lot of my community is familiar with Naborly, right? And now, are you one and the same?
Yeah, there's so much that happened last year. We acquired Naborly in the fall. So Naborly is SingleKey.
And then, so what's the name going forward is SingleKey though?
It's SingleKey. Yeah, we combined it into the SingleKey brand. So I think our competitive difference, our claim to fame that really helped me as an investor was we have an online application that is tenant driven, meaning they fill out all the information. Because previously, to do a proper credit check to get all the information you need to make an informed decision, and I can talk about how to read a credit report because there's lots of mistakes and myths and assumptions that I want to be clear on that. That's an entire conversation on its own. But the SingleKey gave the ability for tenants to fill in their information, because previously, if you use something like tenant verification services or some of these other places, you'd have to go and punch all the information in, and then you basically paid $20 or $30 for the click, and hopefully you didn't make a typo, or you're trying to read the print. I mean, at this time I was still doing paper applications and reading people's printing, and I would blow $25 on a click because buddy didn't spell his name right or change his birth date or whatever. But now they have to input their information. It's all online. It's clean. You get a very comprehensive PDF. And the difference too, that the credit portion of our report is on the typical person's like 5 to 7 pages. And you see all their financial history, their trade lines. And this is where, the credit score itself is great as a starting point, as a quick kind of test, but it's only an instant snapshot in time. It does not give you an idea of how they've been a stewardship of their finances. So if you've got someone that's gone through a major life event like a divorce or a job loss, and their credit score is not the best or it's questionable, you'll see that when you look through the financial history, because you'll see a bunch of missed payments in the 30, 60, 90-day buckets, late buckets, in a narrow, within like a 3 to 6 month time frame. But if you see someone that's got generally late payments across the board, like a checkerboard pattern from day one to now over 5 years, they're just generally not very good at managing their finances. That's the people you want to stay with. But if you get someone that's got a lower credit score, but have been very good up to a certain point in their life, and there's a very valid reason with, again, job loss or divorce, and that explains why they've had a rough patch, but previously before that they've been good, that's a great person to get into your rental property, and they'll probably be very thankful and have even a long-term tenant because you've given the chance. But that's why you can't just take a credit score on the face value.
Oh, that's a mouthful.
It was. I do talk a lot. I'm just giving you a breath here.
And do tenants appreciate this service as well? I find especially the younger generation is completely open to this.
Yeah. There's
which is actually probably the screening thing.
There's always a bit of a demographic out there that think credit checks are too invasive to rent a property.
Yeah, I don't want to rent to them.
Well, that's fine, and to each their own. But we're renting out six-figure assets as collateral, just like a bank does a personal line of credit, as a car dealership will lease or sell you a brand new car.
Yeah.
We now have the same
phone.
tool, or a $200 $1,500 cell phone with a $200 plan. plan a month, or not even $100 plan a month, or
$50
less,
plan. They're doing a credit
right?
check.
And they do credit checks. So we basically have given the mom and pop landlord the same tools of the trade that other institutions that lend out high value assets use to qualify individuals, and rightfully so. And newer tenants actually, and again, younger demographic of the people that have no problem using SingleKey, appreciate, because I, as an individual, don't get or receive the SIN number of the tenant. It's all managed through the same grade security that online banks use to manage your online banking. We do the same thing at SingleKey to protect that personal information. So it actually treats the tenants a lot better. You're not giving a lot of your company information directly to the landlord. Now, granted, we still see a lot of that, but things like the SIN number aren't shared with us. But you can still get the information across to qualify for the rental. So it's a very smooth platform. It's all online. It takes like 10 minutes to fill out an application. And we're bringing in, and now we've got rent collection. So it's pre-authorized debit, the same way you'd pay your utility bill of a checking account. We can collect rent for free up to 3 transactions a month. So if you got 3 leases, do it for free through us. You don't have to follow up with forgetful tenants.
Excuse me,
transfer.
It's free?
It's free right now. Yeah. It's kind of like a lost lead. It's a way to get in and use our ecosystem. And then something I wish we had back in the day when I first started is a rent guarantee, which is, it's kind of like insurance, but essentially, as it sounds, we'll guarantee your rent up to the first 12 months or $60,000, whichever comes first. We'll cover out $10,000 in tenant damage and vandalism. And should worst case be that you need to evict this individual and have to go down that path, we'll cover up to the $1,500 in legal fees, which typically covers most evictions.
That's insane.
And that's at a, I mean, this is my sales pitch, guys, so we'll stop the sales part from here. And that's either, depending if you pay monthly or you pay annually, the premium, it's either 4.5% or 5% of the gross rent. But it's considering it, and I think it's a really good product if you're brand new, you want to sleep at night and not be stressful and stay in this game for a long time. It's a great must-have product. Or if you are in a more higher risk jurisdiction like the BCs and the Ontarios, where there's rent controls and the eviction time is crazy, like half a year or more. And if assuming you don't make any mistakes on all your paperwork and you execute perfectly on the eviction process, if you make any mistake, you just doubled from 8 months to 16 months, which I don't know. I don't know how someone survives floating 2 mortgages, insurance, everything, utility bills, and trying to evict someone in that kind of time frame. It's not fair to anyone. It's not fair to the landlord, and certainly not fair to the tenants if they're living in a subpar, unhealthy, not to the provincial health regulations of a property, and they have an unresponsive landlord. It affects both parties negatively.
So I think that deserves highlighting. Rental guarantee, $10K covers $10K of damages, 12 months of rent, $1,500 for like legal fees,
paralegal, legal eviction costs,
eviction costs.
Yeah, the rent coverage is 60,000 or 12 months, whichever comes first. Yeah,
and while we're selling, I believe we have a discount for my clients, my clients, not my listeners. Sorry, apologies, listeners, but Mackenzie was a tough negotiator. They will only offer a discount to my clients.
That's right. You're one of our exclusive providers. So talk to Aaron. He's got a little bit different take on those numbers for you. I'll let him do his marketing on that side, but he's got a discount offered on what we just talked about. So yes.
For the listeners' benefit, realtor definition: customer is everyone basically I talk to. Client is someone who's actually signed a contractual agreement with me. So it's very clear line drawn in the sand who my client is. So another benefit of being my client. Okay, I'll stop selling.
I love it. No, that's good. Yeah. So I love how you asked. I mean, I've been trying to wrap up the entire podcast here, my adventure, but. So then I tried this year, or 2022 was a big year. I quit my Telus job of 9 years in April to focus on trying to offer a premium tier membership and still maintain the free thing. And I was also trying to move the Facebook group off Facebook because I'm on Facebook's territory. It's their thing. And I know at some point it will change and I will lose access to the 4,000 plus members that we've built up today. So that's another reason to get off it. But anyways, I had my mistake here was when I tried launching it in July, I had simplified it. I only offered a premium membership for the intentional investor, the landlord, which was a minority. I call them like 35% of my membership is people like you and me that want to be in this game, want to get multiple properties, intentionally chosen to pick real estate as an investment vehicle. But I didn't
Oh,
offer a
sorry. What
solution.
was the other? What was the other 65%?
I call them
Flippers?
accidental landlords. Life and
Oh, okay.
circumstance, they're forced to rent out a property and they don't even want to be there. They just need to know enough. They don't make any major mistake, costly,
Right.
a $10,000 eviction or more, and they just need to know what they need to know to operate without spending more time. And they're the majority of our group.
Got it.
So
Like the one-off investor.
yeah, the one off, or I mean, yeah, one door, or they don't, like, again, accidental. They don't even want to be there. So I guess there's two sub demographics. But so I launched the program. I only had a premium tier and a premium offering, but then I made the mistake of telling people I wanted to move off Facebook and force that hand, and it blew up because I wasn't serving the majority of the people's needs. I only had the one property, and I got a licking. Did I ever tell you? So we kind of put a pause in that. And then at the same time,
Don't
about a
take
month
away my
later,
free stuff.
yeah, and then I came on board with Telus, or I came on board with SingleKey a month later. I'd actually talked to a number of my sponsors in January, saying, "Hey, like if I was to leave Telus, would you guys hire me?" And I had got favorable responses from all of them. So I was like,
That's
"Okay, cool."
amazing.
Yeah, it gave me the confidence to quit the job security of my day job that I had worked with really good people, but I hated the actual like my daily responsibility. I just, counting the clock kind of thing. And so did that. And so I tried doing my own entrepreneurial thing, kind of crashed and burned, took some lessons away. I'm still working on making a tenant screening course. I'm coming back again. It's taking a little bit longer because I want to do it right. But again, I also have the issue of uh, uh, perfection over action. I'm trying to correct that as well. But so that now we're here. And then the other thing too is I got hit up in the media with the Edmonton Journal and in June and July as well, across a couple articles. Um, I would say unfairly portraying the story that these Facebook groups were affecting people's ability to rent homes by hoarding do not rent to lists and unfairly targeting individuals. Um, I could speak to that too, a whole nother segment. But yeah, in a ways, we had made the decision years before when I came on in 2020 not to maintain a do not rent to list because there was no proper checks and balances in place for people to get off these lists. But when I
Just
got
like Google reviews and Facebook reviews, and there's tons of checks and balances.
right, well,
Listener, that's complete sarcasm.
yes, well, and just to provide, I want to provide a little bit more context. Was so we had at that point in time in 2020, I think we had around 2,000 members. And there's a great database online called the Canadian Rental Housing Index, I think it's called. I'll share the link with Irvin so you can put in the show notes after. But it tells you that, it tells you how many renting households are in each province. And at that time, there's about 420,000 rental units in the house. And this could be, 1-2 bedrooms, one bedroom suites, 2 bedroom suites, a full house, a basement suite, whatever, main floor. It's just called renting households. Now, going back to our numbers, right, we're talking about earlier is roughly 60 to 70% of older rental stocks held by private mom and pop landlords. So if I take 420,000, I'm going to do this exercise because I'm the big point here. 420,000, I divide it, or I only take 65% of that because let's just say that's how much is mom and pop. We take out the big multifamily players. That drops down to 273,000 rental units in Alberta. Now, on top of that, I know the average landlord, again, from numbers I've seen, owns about 2.5 doors. But divide that by 2.5 doors, that's 109,000 approximately landlords, private individual landlords in Alberta. And I had less than 2,000 landlords on my page. And I was being roasted in the media saying that I was taking away people's ability to get affordable housing because they were being unfairly blacklisted. And we weren't even doing that, to be truthful with you. So actually, to be truthful, up to 2020, we did have a list. And then when I came in, I had talked, and I was bringing on sponsorship. I had some great conversations with some industry players, talked to some lawyers, and they highlighted the fallacies that the article talks about, where there's no checks and balances. And we totally agree with that. So we stopped doing that in 2020. But then in 2022, in June, July, I got put into this news article like we were still doing it as of last week. And what this reporter had found, she got into my Facebook group undetected for about a month. And in some posts, there was a tag that you could click on to filter posts about people warning other landlords about really challenging tenants. And by the way, these are generally the worst, the bad apples of the group. Now, granted, it could be a couple people that got caught in this list. I don't know, because again, there was no checks and balances, but we stopped maintaining that list. But she said, because I had this filter that I wasn't even aware this was still there, that was allowing people to filter a list or posts in Facebook. She called that a list. And so she said that we're still doing it. So we deleted it right away once we realized we still had it. But yeah, she wouldn't talk to us. And I offered I'll hop on a recorded call like this. You can ask me anything, but it has to be recorded because I want context, because it's so important to have context around quotes to, not have them taken out of context. Anyways, yeah. So learned a lot in that kind of brush with mainstream media, and it just now, like, I always knew, like, you look at a story, there's always context missing to it. I knew that, I've always known it, but now I probably really greatly underestimated how often that happens.
Yeah.
So
hit pieces often are just taken out of context.
Yeah.
You said this back in 2004. You're a racist. We need to cancel you.
Oh, yeah. So
I heard you singing NWA lyrics. You're obviously a racist.
I think we may have 300 to 400 people on the old list that got thrown out when I took over in 2020. And anyways, if I'm 2,000 members and there's 109,000 landlords in Alberta with an average of 2.5 doors, we were not impacting the majority of society's ability to get rentals. Not even close.
Yeah, not even close. Yeah, but the media wants something
that
would generate hate and trigger.
Right. Yeah. Anyways, it was good. It was a good way to, and I've always approached this too. Like when we have conversations in the private Facebook group, or I do these conversations, or I did shop talks, I always spoke with the context in mind that everyone, these words spoken will become public one day, or always will be public. So I want to speak in the same way that I would, in a private setting, it would sound the same way if it's released out in the media. So I think you got to really approach it that way too, because the relationship between tenants and landlords is mutually beneficial. Like we need tenants, and tenants need good quality landlords. They want a great place to call home. We need someone who's willing to pay the rent to cover the cost to do this business of investment rentals. And the vast majority, I'd say 95%, are folks exactly like that. Mm-hmm. Let's say 90%. The other 5% are folks that want to be like that, but they're in financial trouble and they're having trouble getting their rentals. And then that last 5% are the bad apples, the ones that cause the problems for everybody else that has these 8 months waits at the LTB. And on that same accord too, a lesson learned, I probably spent an unhealthy amount of hours that following weeks when I got into the media, reading every forum, every Facebook group had posted that article. I read every comment. Just, I wanted to get a sense. And what I learned out of that was the majority of landlords and tenants were all in favor of a do not rent to list. They said if people are being predatory and they're attacking tenants or landlords and they're bad, let's ban them from the industry, kick them out or whatever. And that was the general consensus I got. I've read a couple thousand comments, and I thought that was really interesting. And I totally would actually kind of agree with that statement. To really solve this problem, we need to get rid of the slumlords, and I use that word very sparingly, and the professional tenants, because they're both damaging livelihoods. Either you ruin someone financially that took a decade or longer or a century to build up a nest egg to retire on, and that can get destroyed overnight by burning down a property or whatever, right? By completely ruining a rental property. And by the same accord, tenants deserve great quality places to live, and there's unfortunately bad apples, and there's bad apples everywhere. And I've never not said that. that there's landlords that don't, or slumlords that don't provide all the necessities that people need for basic living standards. So there's a really good podcast. It's is by CBC. I also not a huge fan, but this was investigative reporting, and it was called Slumtown. It was about this high profile criminal up in Edmonton that had a ton of properties. He actually got murdered last year, so he's no longer around. But the first episode I wanted to kind of point attention to is this journalist, and I forget her name, which is I feel bad, but she kind of highlighted all these different jurisdictions around the world combating bad landlords. So it was talking about Scotland, Baltimore, and a couple of these places. And anyways, they're banning landlords from owning properties that had a bad track record. So, they're intentionally slumlords. They had to get their properties commandeered, auctioned off, and then the proceeds would go towards combating slumlords and maintain that. So I thought that was brilliant. I'm totally on favor of bringing legislation in that will remove landlords from the property to the point that they'll lose the property, and remove all that motivation to be cheap, to make money, that they can actually lose it and actually get banned from owning properties in the city or province. And then on the same side, if someone's been predatory and is a professional tenant that has a track record of destroying people's livelihoods and properties, they should be flagged in an online database. Just same thing with the slumlord, and people should know about it. And it just makes it so difficult for them to do the evils that they're doing that they don't participate anymore.
Right. It's essentially white collar crime. You're stealing. Yeah. A quick question: does SingleKey screen for people who've been convicted of crimes?
It does. Yeah, we have a online source that does over it's a huge number, hundreds or thousands of databases. But the caveat is, I want to put in the picture here. Well, it does do a big search. Not all jurisdictions release criminal records, or they're not all public or publicly available that can be scanned online. So yes, we provide that, but I always say do your due diligence. For example, in Alberta, for evictions from RTDRS, you have to go down to the local courthouse and do an in-person search. Mm-hmm. So, take that with a grain of salt. But any criminal convictions and things that are in that are public records, we'll be able to pick, that are available online, we'll be able to pick them up.
Wouldn't you see a gap in someone's income for the time they were incarcerated?
Yeah, well, I mean, and this goes back, going back to tenant screen up front. There's a phone script you should be using. There's very select questions you should be using, and one of the biggest tips I always give away, people kind of look at me cockeyed, like, "Why? That makes no sense." But I tell them, ask the same questions repeatedly. Ask them in your first contact on the phone call, ask them during the viewing, and ask them on the follow-up call. And if you ask the same questions 3 times, you should have a very similar answer every time. If it's changing and the details are slightly moving, well, chances are someone's lying, and the folks that lie, that try to get past you, can't keep their facts straight. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see red flags, and you can dive into that further. Right. And I always tell people right on the phone call, I do background and credit checks. I know we've been talking for a long time. This is going to be like a 2-hour episode. But and
we still have to have you back. We still have to go through how to screen a tenant, and probably a separate one on how to read a credit report.
Yes, 100%. And anyways, you ask these questions, and you want to make sure the story is consistent. If it's not, red flags, dig into it further. You might be getting fed some inaccurate information, to put it lightly.
Mackenzie, thank you so much for going over time. Again, I think we will rebook you for how to run a SingleKey report, how to do a tenant screen, and probably a separate one completely on how to read a report.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled next week to have you on a podcast that I'm launching. You're going to be my initial binge launch series of my binge watching. We're going to do about 5 episodes on the launch here, February 1st. Hopefully I can execute on that deadline, because I have to. We're launching. It's for rent conversations to better the rental industry. Thank you, Owen.
Yeah, and for the listener, all the links will be in the show notes, as long as Mackenzie gets them to me by tomorrow, since this pod episode drops
I hope
on
you're
the
writing them
following
down,
Monday.
and then I will help you out, and I'll give you a bio and all that stuff too. I read your sheet before we
Right.
started the podcast, so
Just
anyways,
like getting forms wrong, I don't trust me to write everything down correctly.
absolutely. Let me know. I will source all that information. And you guys can find me on LinkedIn, Mackenzie Wilson. I'm on Facebook as well because I have this Facebook group. My pleasure, Erwin. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
And I had to Google it. Fewer than 5% of people compulsively lie or pathologically. So hence your advice to ask the same question 3 times. 95% of people cannot beat it.
Well, and think of it this way too. I think honest people will lie if they're in like if you got someone's in a really tough situation, perhaps someone fleeing domestic violence, or they have no money, they're between jobs, and they normally wouldn't, but under very challenging circumstances, they'll change a bit of facts to look a little bit better to get the rental. Would you? Unfortunately, I'd say if I was in those situations, I would probably I'd probably fudge the facts so if I shine a degree or two better than what I would normally do if I didn't have that kind of pressure on me. Mm-hmm. So honest people,
those people exist.
Yeah, and so I mean, there's that part too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I could go on forever, but essentially, they're out there. They wouldn't normally do it. They're all good intention, but if someone's in a challenging enough adversity, they gotta do what they gotta do to survive.
And where can people get more information on SingleKey?
SingleKey.com. Come check us out.
Is it appropriate to call it, like, formerly known as Naborly is now part of SingleKey? Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Naborly is now SingleKey. We're one and the same. So and if you guys are curious about checking out Alberta, go check out the Alberta Landlord Community.ca. It's a private forum that I'm moving towards from the Facebook, but there's also on Facebook the same name. You can find our Facebook group as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mackenzie.
Cheers.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy that I personally use in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/YouTube to register for our next class. The link is also in the description as well. I publish at least 2 to 3 videos a week here, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. And if you're just starting out, feel free to ask questions and comment below, and I do the best to answer each of those comments and questions myself. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing from a professional investor, register for our next virtual class. That's at investortraining.ca/YouTube. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.